Hello, welcome back. I'm Eleanor. Thank you for coming. And this is my podcast between Nasi Goreng and fried rice. Good morning, Jasmine. Hello. Thank you so much for coming here. I think for most podcasts, I would say, do introduce yourself because we've not met for a longer time and I don't know all that much about you. So do introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you for having me here. Real pleasure. My name is Jasmine Thien. I am a fully blind actor, playwright, poet, and stand-up comedian. I was born and raised in Brunei in Southeast Asia. I came to the UK in 2017. Yes, 2017, at age 21. And now I'm here.
It's lovely to have you here, and I'm really, really excited. And we've been talking loads just before this. I'm very excited because I know you have a play. But before that, I'd like to know a bit more about, your background in Borneo. And also, I think, if I'm not wrong, the university here you went to was Oxford?
I went to Cambridge.
Oh, Cambridge, sorry.
We don't talk about that other place.
Oh.
It's just a little joke that Cambridgeites and Oxfordites, I don't know what they're called.
Oxbridge.
Yeah. We don't like each other, shall we say. Cambridge is a lot better than Oxford because I think it was in the 1100s or 1200s, we left Oxford and we started our own university. So they came first and were better.
I don't have that privilege. Of course, we always say, Oxbridge for the elite. I know quite a few people from both universities say, yeah, how did you get from Borneo to Cambridge, or what happens in between, or,
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever.
So I was really, really lucky. I went to an excellent international school in Brunei for my A-levels, and they had quite a good reputation for preparing their students to go to the top universities, not just in the UK, but all around the world. At the time, I genuinely never had Oxbridge in my sight. I thought that is for people who are far more advanced than I am. No way, I'm never going to apply to Oxbridge. And I had, my teachers were very, very supportive. They saw my potential way before I did. And one of my teachers, bless her, she just pulled me aside one day and she said, have you thought of applying to Cambridge? And I was like, absolutely not. And she says, well, I think you should apply. Do it for me as a favour. And I was like, okay, I'll do it because I love you. And I did. I applied to Cambridge. She helped me prepare, arranged lots of mock interviews for me and got me to read a lot of newspapers. And I got into Cambridge, much to my
done
delight.
you. I mean, I had a completely different thing because I was obviously not such a bright student or good student. In fact, I was terrible at school. I just did what I enjoyed, which was reading a lot of books. And one of my friends, actually, when she came here last year, she said, oh, you didn't do well in your exams. It's because you were reading too many storybooks, was her word.
That
That
sounds very relatable.
And I said, actually, I was good in English and everything, that I wrote in English, I did well, and that's how I did reasonably well. But I was terrible in science, and I got put in the science stream, which sort of pulled out all my results, and I didn't care. I don't know, it might be because I had ADHD at that time or whatever, or whether it was because my parents were, concerned about my results, but they never told me off. So I just continued. And then I don't think that I would have even made it to a Malaysian university. First of all, they're not accessible. And I think I knew that. And, I didn't think that I was going anywhere. However, my parents decided that, I couldn't further my education in Malaysia, so they sent me off here to the UK with the thought that if I didn't manage doing it here, I could just go home. There wouldn't be any loss. Anyway, so I was lucky in that I had great parents. And when I was at school, not to go into that, I used to play hooky, which is, so I wasn't a good disabled child. I was really I just went my own way.
Oh, to be absolutely clear, I was not a good child either. I think I was very, very lucky in that I was always academically gifted. And I'm not saying that as like a credit to myself or anything like that. I think I just happened to be born to be academically gifted. So school, frankly, bored me quite a lot. And I also skived a lot. I'd rather not be in school because I found it very, very dull. But I think there was an element of, I always did well. I was always top of my class. So in some ways, I think the school had the attitude of, well, as long as she's doing well, doesn't really matter if she's not often in class or paying attention, really. And B, I think there was also an element of, well, that, the poor disabled girl, let's not get her into trouble, let's not tell her off, let's not discipline her, etc., which in a way was great for me. But I will say that as much as I did go to Cambridge and I did do well, I did struggle a lot in Cambridge because I found that I had not learned to have a good work ethic because I never needed one. I was able to sail through primary and secondary school. So it was only in Cambridge that I realised that I had quite severe ADHD and I could no longer just put in minimal effort and do well.
Well, I don't know, but I was, I think, in the top class in my school, and they were all extremely good in their studies, but none of them sort of expected me not to do as well as anybody else. If I had an excuse, I would say that I was left out of a lot of things, being I didn't use wheelchair, but had a mobility environment, which means that the things that my class did was like, singing in the choir nationally, or putting up a play, or marching in a school band. I couldn't do any of those things. And also being left out a lot of sport and stuff like that. So a lot of time I was left alone in class.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and so, that had a sort of influence. I don't really know. I don't really think I thought about that. How do you think, because this is something that I am interested in, so forgive me if I ask, how do you think you would have survived, and I use the word survive, in Brunei if you had not come to the UK?
Badly. I think there is a reason why I wanted to leave. So, to give a bit of background on my medical history, I was born with a condition called retinoblastoma, which is essentially cancer of the eye. And I lost my sight gradually over time between the ages of 0 and 8. So I was in and out of hospital quite a lot. I didn't really have a childhood, to be honest, in a lot of ways. And Brunei, and I know that we're probably going to discuss this a little bit further, but to give a very brief overview, my community is not the best when it comes to how they view disabled people and disability in general. I was socially isolated for most of my life, up to the age of 21 when I left to come to the UK. I think disability is often seen as the worst possible fate that can ever befall anybody. And I just felt throughout my life that I was less than. I was seen as less of a person. And there was the very blatant attitude that I would never make it in life. I would never be able to do anything. I would never be able to hold down a job, have a relationship, maintain meaningful friendships. Even my education, I was often told growing up that I should be grateful that I was even allowed to have an education, because most disabled children and most disabled young people in our community were kept sequestered at home and not allowed to see the light of day, because there's a lot of shame attached to having a disabled child. So I was often told that I should be grateful that I was even allowed to have an education. And I remember when I took my GCSEs, for example, I insisted on taking all of my GCSEs just like everybody else, but I was urged over and over again to drop any GCSEs that I found challenging for whatever reason, like maths, like physics, that are quite visual in a lot of ways. I was told to drop them because the argument was, well, no one would ever expect you to have to do things that are difficult because, yeah, just no one has any expectations of you, basically. So I hated that. I hated the discrimination, I hated the ableism, I hated the attitudes they had towards me as a disabled person. So I was very determined to leave, and I left, and I've never gone back except for visits.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. I don't know in Malaysia, although I have met other disabled people since, and I do know that for most disabled people, children, they get put into orphanages or not have any education. I did meet somebody in Penang who actually ran a business in providing accessible vans for people in wheelchairs to get from A to B. And she told me that she didn't have an education because she was disabled, and she was very happy to go into a sort of protected kind of education place. I suppose in this country it'd be called a special school, although there was nothing special about it. It's just that, she got the very, very basic education. But the fact that she managed to own a business and run it was all credit to her. But this is how I think, what would have happened if my parents weren't sort of a cooler word, enlightened and push me ahead. Because actually, I don't think I was at all ambitious when I was a child. I just sort of, did whatever I fancied, and nobody disciplined me. So I guess the reason why I am where I am is mostly very greatly due to my parents and
Yeah.
their support, really.
Yeah, and I'm really, really happy for you that your parents were so supportive and so loving. And I want to be clear, my parents were very supportive and loving as well. And I know that they loved me very, very much. I think they just didn't know how to support me because, again, we didn't really know any other disabled people in our community because, again, as I say, they're often hidden away. So for my parents, they were considered pioneers in a way of having a disabled child who was publicly seen and who did go to school and had, in quotation marks, a normal upbringing. So I think with your question, I think one of two things can happen, right? If we were not to have that support from our parents or from our community or from school or whatever, I think one of two things could happen. One is that we become a self-fulfilling prophecy and we acquire learned helplessness, as it were, and become unable to function because we're told over and over again that we can never function. Or what happened to me, I think, was that because I was told over and over again that I wouldn't be able to be anything, because I was a very stubborn and headstrong child, my attitude was, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. So they said I would never be able to do well in school. Well, I freaking topped my class every single year. They said I couldn't live on my own. Well, I migrated across continents and lived abroad on my own. You know, they said I could never do anything with my life. Well, I started a freelancing career. I'm not saying that's healthy. I am in a lot of therapy because I realize that I'm obsessed with this idea of wanting to prove people wrong for what they used to say to me, which is not healthy. But I think that is something that could have happened to anyone else in a similar position.
I think you probably touch on a lot of this in your play, and I do want to start talking about your play and, encourage people to go and see it. So give us your pitch.
Oh, my elevator pitch.
That's it.
Absolutely. So my play is called I Dream in Colour, and it's a semi-autobiographical play inspired from my experiences growing up in Brunei and coming to England. So the elevator pitch I give is Sophie, my main character, learns that there is a tumour in her right eye, her remaining eye, actually. Her other eye is a prosthetic, like me. And she learns that there's a tumour and she's given a choice. Either surgically remove this eye or keep it and risk eye cancer again. Which sounds like a very easy choice, right? Why would you want to risk that? Well, two things. One, her parents have done absolutely everything in their power to keep this eye with the hope that one day medical science will become advanced enough for her to get her eyesight back. So that's the reason one for keeping it. And two, as a disabled woman growing up in Borneo, she has never learned that she has agency or bodily autonomy. So that is the pitch, basically, of what the play is about. So throughout the play, the audience follows Sophie through flashbacks of her childhood and her young adulthood, and they come to understand, I hope, why she struggles so much to recognize that she does have agency.
Wow. And this play is when?
So it is on the 22nd and 23rd of July at the Omnibus Theatre in Clapham in South London at 7 p.m. And we will be up in Edinburgh Fringe for the entire month, which I'm very excited about. We're there from the 30th of July to the 24th of August at the Frisian at Underbelly at 2:20 p.m. So come and see it. I'd really, really love to see.
Yeah, we should push it as far as we can, as much as we should. Apart from that, I mean, I'm just thinking back about the sort of podcast that the sort of questions that I normally ask people is, most people talk about their connections with their heritage, is about food or sort of music or whatever. Having left Brunei, what do you miss? Do you miss anything?
I miss the food. Definitely, I miss the food. I miss... How do I put this? I miss the hospitality, I think. Because what I find living in London is that everyone doesn't know each other. And I find that very strange coming from a country of 400,000 people where absolutely everybody knows each other, which brings its own unique challenges. But there is a sense of community in that everyone knows each other and everyone says hi when you're out and about, because everyone knows you, or they know your parents, or they know your uncle, or whatever. I think in terms of my relationship with my heritage, I have to say I rejected my heritage for a very long time because I associated the difficult upbringing I have very closely with my heritage and my community and my people. So for a long time, I didn't want anything to do with it. It was not until a couple years ago that I started being curious about my heritage, and I dug into it and did a lot of reading around it. I am Hakka, both my parents are Hakka, and I had no idea about our history, that we were a migrant people, for example, that we never really had a home. I never realized, honestly, embarrassingly, that the word for Hakka, Kurtzia, translates to guest families or guest peoples. I never made that connection for some reason until I read it, and a lot of it clicked in my head, and I just thought, oh my gosh, we never belonged anywhere. We were always a displaced people. And something about it just made me fall in love with my heritage and my community in a way that I never had before. And I realized that in some ways, and I do explore this to some extent in my play as well, that the difficulty of accepting your child being disabled, I think anyway, and this is sort of my own headcanon theory around it, and I might be completely wrong, but the way I sort of found my way to this idea was I thought about this community of people that kept being forced to migrate, kept having to start a life all over again from nothing, and who learned that life is about survival and struggle and giving your children the best possible life they possibly can have, because you don't know when that life might be taken away and you might have to start over again. And this history, this, if we want to call it intergenerational trauma, I think creates a situation where, of course, you wouldn't want your child to be disabled. Of course, you wouldn't be able to accept that, because you want your child to have the best chances in life. That if you were to have to move and start again, your child being disabled is going to hugely disadvantage them in that act to start again. So that was how, for me, I started forgiving my community for how I experienced being disabled.
That is very interesting. I mean, and I do know some Hakka people, but I never sort of researched into it or thought about it. But there is one thing that I found out about Hakka people. I'm not sure this is true or not, but apparently Hakka women had big feet.
We didn't participate in foot binding.
That's it. Yeah. And I thought that was just wonderful. You know, the Hakka women were so strong in that they never had to kowtow to the food binding, which was
non-conformist, you mean, or defiant? However we want
they were strong women.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm looking at the time, and I'm just wondering, and I want to ask you, where do you see your future? What hopes, plans have you got? I mean, if you have any thoughts about it, if you're willing to share with us, this would be so fantastic.
Yeah, so in terms of my play, I really see a future for it post Edinburgh Fringe. I don't think that I Dream in Colour, well, I hope that I Dream in Colour is not a show that goes to the Fringe and then peters out. I really wanted to have a future. We have talks about doing a national tour, maybe an international tour, because I would love as many people to see it. I mean, Hakka people are the largest diaspora of Chinese people all around the world, apparently. We're the largest diaspora of Chinese people outside of China. So I like to think that there is an audience for us everywhere. And in terms of my personal career, I'm still very, very new to my career. I started working as a freelance artist in early 2023, took a break for a year to go to drama school and train as an actor for a year, and now I'm back at it again. Yeah, I just want to make work. I just want to make plays. I just want to make short films, feature films. I want to write more. I want to create more poetry. I want to gig more as a stand-up comedian. I just want to work, basically. And I just want to tell my story.
How exciting. And I think this is a good place to stop.
Thank you for having me.
Moment. Yeah, and no, thank you for your fascinating chat. My brain doesn't work this early in the morning, although it's not exactly early in the morning. But so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.